Duzum Sanjay Tom, Jejimo, Return Chokor Janso Chada, Drinjen Sawelama Shabdor Drima Mebarat, Gubegone Chas, Ashin Chapson Yorji, or Dashin Sanjay Tom, Jeji Jumin Jindro, Origin Love to Sidan Jeji, Chandra Buzerji, Dalutimo, Mumbar of Sami, Kadan Tenchu, Shunglo Tobai, Lodu Papa, Nangwa Jeto, so. Nama Arya Lai Kedan Ladan Jinke, Drunda Dami Kenandang, Dro Kanji Dragi Jizambaratam Jekedo Dagi Chetendo, Simjanam Jizambadan Loi Cherajidawar, Jejon Tomonte Bayi, Jeji Korlo Kordoso, Chasrawadan Jejin Shabadan, Jesu Iran Kurjin Sowayi, Gewa Chunse Dagi Chizaba, Tam Jezo Bejanju Jimbo. Hola. So we're going to try to do a couple of different things this evening to keep you entertained. With if we have technical support, we can do. First, I wanted to just talk to you in a very introductory way, at a very general level, about the meaning of Dharma, just to create some connection because it's the first time we're meeting. And then if all goes well, we'll have kind of a slideshow presentation about my monastery in Tibet, just to give you an idea of what's actually going on there, the kind of Dharma that's being practiced and the place. So after this introductory meeting tonight, then if you're continue to be interested, then in the weekend and early next week, we can continue to meet together and talk about some other topics of Dharma and practice. So let's begin with why we're all here tonight, which is something that we have in our mind that we call Dharma. Sanskrit Dharma. In Tibetan we say Chu. In English we also say Dharma. We have no word for this, so we have to say Dharma. The original word in Sanskrit has many meanings, like phenomena, or spiritual values, or spiritual system, or truth. These are some of the more important meanings of the word in the original Sanskrit. So when the Dharma, the teachings of Buddha, went to Tibet originally, 1,000 years ago plus, the Tibetans had one advantage that nowadays we don't have, which is that they didn't even have really a written language, and so they didn't have to worry about how to translate the word from Sanskrit into their own language. They knew it was impossible, so they just made up a word, which is similar in sound and in some meanings to other words that they had in Tibetan, but they made up this word called Chu. But English, of course, has a very long history as spoken language with many dialects and rich literature of many types. And so we think, well, what word can possibly convey the meaning of Chu or Dharma? And it's very hard, so people begin to wonder, well, is it more like religion, religious belief, or is it more like some philosophical view or description of reality that's very philosophical? Or is it more like, when we say phenomena, does that mean it's more like an objective or scientific description of what experience is and how the mind operates? So there's many different possibilities. Even when I was coming here on the airplane, the lady next to me was interested in my clothes, and I said I was a Buddhist. She said, "Oh, so is that a religion?" And I said, "It's funny that you ask." That's what I'm going to talk about, I think, when I get there. So we say within the teachings of Buddha that there are actually, it's more abstract or symbolic than literal, but we say there are 84,000 different baskets or doorways or approaches to understanding what we call Dharma. So there's not just one thing. So given that, it makes sense to accept that Dharma doesn't have to be just one thing. There are 84,000 different approaches, Buddha said, because there are so many different kinds of beings with different kind of mentality, different level of intelligence, different kind of interest, different kinds of perceptions. And his purpose was to try to express some truth in a way that was accessible or made sense to all of these different kinds of people. And so for some people we can say, more of a religious feeling or sense of faith and devotion is more natural or comfortable. For other people, more analytic and philosophical, then they need to really argue and debate and understand from that perspective. And for some people, they want to know, does it work? And if it works for you, does it also work for me? So it's more like empirical or scientific. It has to be proven and verifiable and repeatable, like any kind of scientific investigation or experiment. And so we have a lineage or a continuity of these teachings of Dharma only because it's worked over and over again. Otherwise we would just be wasting our time. Sometimes people who study a lot, very intelligent, they look at other people who just pray from their heart to the Buddha for help, for blessing, as too kind of simple-minded or ignorant, blind faith. And sometimes people who have strong faith, they say, those people who just study, it's just very dry and hollow and empty, their hearts are not really changing, so how does the Dharma benefit them? So there's these kinds of criticisms back and forth, and I think in either case it's kind of too narrow-minded, too close-minded, and we have to be very open and appreciate that different people respond and benefit in different ways. So I think being very honest or plain or realistic, that when you look at any of the great spiritual, let's use that word, any of the great spiritual traditions in the world, there's a, we could say a popular level or a level at which people look to the source of protection or refuge for help as something that is really outside of themselves, that's very powerful when they're very weak, and they say, please help me, or please find a good husband for my daughter, or give me money, or cure this illness, or whatever kinds of problems they have. They're just looking for some kind of immediate salvation or help, and that's true whether Christian or Hindu or Buddhist or anything. Though I'm American, I've traveled in Buddhist circles in many cultures, in many countries all over the world. And so I have found this to be true, that on the most simple level, people look to a higher power because they feel like there's something wrong in their lives that they want to fix or they want to cure, and they want help. They want some kind of power that's kind and benevolent and loving to intervene, to reach down from the sky and help them. So they go to the temple and they put fruit on the shrine in the Buddhist temples, or they kowtow or whatever they do. Actually, this would come as no surprise to the Buddha himself, that there are all different kinds of mentalities or approaches, motivations within the minds of Buddhists, his followers, because the Buddha described different levels at which people take an interest in his teachings. First, he said the most basic or rough motivation someone can have for studying his teachings of Dharma is because they want something better in this life. They're not really worried about, whether there's rebirth or, becoming liberated from suffering. They just want right now some kind of short-term benefit or improvement to just come down miraculously from the sky, and so they just pray for that. But then beyond that, he said, that's called Tsedipa. In Tibetan means this lifer, someone just interested in getting ahead in this life. So they use Dharma the same way they use anything else that they have available in their life, which is to try to get ahead or have a better life. And please understand that this is not purely a matter of how someone acts or what they say their interest or their motivation is. It's what's really in their heart or what's really in their mind. So if someone dresses like a spiritual person and sounds like a spiritual person, but in their mind they're thinking, this is the best way for me to get respect and money and praise, then they're this kind, they're this lifer, because that's their real motivation. Then somewhat better than that, or more advanced or sophisticated from the Buddhist perspective, is the person who really starts to think about why things are the way they are, why we end up being happy or why we end up suffering, and they start to investigate and study and learn about what must be done differently, how they need to change in order to have more happiness and less suffering. And they can even take a longer term view and think that even if I don't immediately get to change everything bad in my life and get everything good, at least in the future or even a future life, I'll be going in a better direction. So maybe right now I'm very poor or I'm very sick, but if I practice sincerely and try to be less harmful to others and so on, then maybe next life I will have a healthy body and good conditions and just continue to get better life after life. Then the Buddha said, the level at which someone really can be said to have authentically or genuinely taken refuge, that means rely on his teachings and follow them correctly, is when they begin to really see and accept that the way that we go about trying to find happiness and avoid suffering in our lives is itself causing all the trouble. That we are misunderstanding the very nature of what this life, this existence is. We are looking at kind of an impermanent, ever-changing, ever-shifting flow of moment-to-moment appearances and phenomena, as if it's some kind of real, solid, permanent, external world that we need to manipulate skillfully so that we can secure some kind of real and lasting happiness. But when we see that it's not really like that, that it's like trying to control a dream and not allow it to change, it's impossible, then something shifts. And we see that the whole way we've been looking at things and the whole way we've been trying to find contentment or peace of mind or lasting happiness has been misguided or misdirected. And when we start to relate to the Buddha's teachings on that level, then the goal becomes something deeper, which we call liberation or freedom from conditioned existence, especially freedom from this mistaken view or understanding that we have of who we are and what's really going on here. So when our interest in, our motivation and our approach to Dharma becomes more like that, that is, we can say closer to the actual intention of the Buddha, what he had in mind when he was teaching, closer and closer to what he's really, you could say, thinking, for lack of a better word, then we can say that then Dharma has two aspects. One we can say is descriptive and one is prescriptive. What is it descriptive of? What does the Buddha attempt to describe in his teachings? What he tries to describe is we can talk about in terms of two truths, relative truth and ultimate truth. So what the Buddha described was what our experience actually is. And so the way we experience things, the way things happen to us or in our lives, is called the truth of interdependence, that nothing whatsoever that we can think of, that we can talk about, that we can experience through our senses or experience in our mind, nothing exists in and of itself, separately, permanently, just as it is, but rather everything that we can think about and name and describe and experience is itself just a momentary gathering or dispersal of many different factors and conditions, which themselves are also just the interplay or interconnectedness of other momentary things coming together and separating. So nothing really exists the way it appears, the Buddha said. When we just don't think about it, everything seems to be really out there. And we have this sense, even if we don't think about it, we have this sense that we are over here, inside somewhere, somehow, inside something, the head, the body, and that there's really an inside and an outside, and they're really separate. And so the world is really out there, and I'm really in here, and we relate to everything that appears in our experience from that perspective. So the Buddha said that that's wrong. That's wrong. Because in fact, everything appears only through interdependent circumstances, causes, and conditions. So the Buddha said the nangtsur and netsur, the way things appear to us or the way we perceive them, and the way they actually are far apart. I don't want to get too much into this kind of discussion because it's meant to be just introductory talk this evening. But we can just say in a very general way that in one way or another, all of the Buddhist schools accept that relatively, in terms of our experience and appearances, that things are interdependent, but ultimately they are not really that way. So they can be said to be empty. And then that is empty of separate existence. And in our Nyingma school, like according to Mipam and other masters, we say the similar thing, just a little bit differently. We say, as Nagarjuna taught, appearance and emptiness are actually two sides of the same truth. They're really the same. So he calls this union of appearance and emptiness is relative truth. But what ultimate truth is beyond our ability to say because it's not relative. Anything we can say, anything we can think about or describe is necessarily that condition within that conditioned relative interdependent world. So if something is really ultimate, it cannot be grasped or captured within the limited terms and concepts that correspond to the interdependent truth. So that is the reality or truth that Buddha is describing in his teachings. That's the descriptive part. What is the prescriptive part? Like a prescription, like a doctor gives you a prescription to heal from some illness, right? Some course of treatment, medicine. The prescription is, what do we need to do to close that huge gap between how we currently experience things and how they actually are? So if there's this gap between two things, right, there's really only two ways to close it. Either this goes this way or this goes this way. So the modern Western materialistic approach is to try to make the world of phenomena more permanent, more perfect, more reliable, try to develop medicine to the point where we won't age and we won't die, and when we build something, it will never fall apart. Buddha said that's never going to happen. That's just not in the nature of things, to turn from something that's impermanent, momentary, dreamlike, to something that is permanent, perfect, reliable, and so on. So that means from the Buddhist teaching perspective, the only choice is for us to change the way we think, to come closer and closer to matching how it actually is. We can't make the world turn into what we think it is. Again, not to get too much into this point, but one of the seals taught by the Buddha as one of his basic teachings is that everything that is composite, that is the result of different things coming together, is impermanent and will definitely dissolve or fall apart at one point or another. That's just the nature of it. And likewise, the Buddha said in what he calls the four ends or four results, that the end of every building is collapse, the end of every meeting is separation, and so on. So from the Buddhist perspective, we can never turn appearances into perfect, unchanging, permanent things. It's just not in the nature of things. But looking at our own lives, is there anyone here who can say that they never got upset just because something changed or broke or left or fell apart? When things change, or people leave, things break, we get upset. That's our first reaction. Why? Because we think somehow, without examining it, that they should just last forever. They should just stay exactly the way we want them, never change, never go away, always be completely reliable. But it's kind of silly, because things are just not like that. That's not their nature. So if we think about these things and we start to accept that it's really up to us to change how we think and how we look at things, how we perceive things, to come to begin to match more and more closely how they actually are, how it is. If we accept that it's our job to change ourselves, our own view and mentality, to correspond to what is already real, then according to Buddhist teachings, there are 3 steps involved. The first step is just what we've been doing here, which is hearing this kind of discussion and beginning to let it sink in and think, well, oh, impermanent, that's interesting. Empty phenomena, what does that mean? So begin to hear this kind of discussion, and then second, having begun to hear about this, start to really think about it and take it to heart and see, well, is that really true, and what does it mean for me? What does it mean in terms of my life and my experience, that things are impermanent and things are always going to change no matter what I wish or no matter what idea I have? It's the nature of things to change. So it's called hearing, reflecting, and then the third step of the 3 is called meditation, or taking into experience, which means starting to take it seriously enough that you train within your own mind to start to actually look at things that way, actually experience things that way, through different kinds of trainings that we can talk about. So if you hear these kinds of teachings and you just accept them, maybe because your family is brought up that way, you accept this kind of Buddhist view or explanation, or because friends who you trust are interested in Buddhism, so you say, yeah, okay, everything's impermanent, whatever, that's what the Buddhists say, that's cool, that's all right. Or you find some teacher and you think, wow, they look really special and impressive, so it must be true because they say so. Then that's the first level of just hearing, and then it's really just like kind of a religious approach, because you don't actually know yet whether it's true or not. You haven't really thought about it carefully, but there's, for some reason, something is appealing or interesting or makes you want to believe that. So then it's like a religion. Then when you start to reflect and ask yourself, well, is it true or isn't it? And really reflect, maybe even debate, ask questions, get clarification. Then when we talk about relative truth, ultimate truth, the relationship between relative truth, ultimate truth, are they really 2 or are they just 1, and all this kind of thing, then it's more like philosophy, because you can have different positions and counterpositions and arguments, and you want intellectually to have someone prove, and for you to prove to yourself that the teachings are true. And then once intellectually we think it's pretty likely that this is correct, then we want to really work on changing our own experience so it matches what we have intellectually understood. So for example, to explain the difference, we can say in a dream that what's happening is not real, it's just empty appearance, it's not, if we're about to fall off a cliff in a dream, we think, okay, it's not real, we can accept that, but still in the dream, every time we're in that situation, we feel fear, like we're really going to die. So intellectually, we can say, yes, that's not real experience, but in terms of how we perceive and experience, it feels very real still. So it means we still have a way to go. And so this stage, this third stage called Gom, or meditation or familiarization, means making our actual experience match what we have intellectually understood. And what's interesting here is that once we do that, and there's many different kinds of what we call meditation practices or trainings that we go through, working directly with the mind to transform how it experiences, how it perceives. Once we do that and we start to really experience reality as it is, impermanent as impermanent, empty as empty, and so on, then at that point we can't say it's just philosophy anymore. Because it's not just intellectual, it's not just a theory or an idea to debate or to prove or disprove. It's how we actually live, it's how we actually experience. So that's more where the scientific validity has been established, where, you know, we can live that truth. So going back to where we started, which is this word chö, or Dharma, we said when it's presented as a set of teachings, it has the descriptive side, it has the prescriptive side. But now let's look at it a different way, which is from the perspective of ourselves, our own experience. And so the word Dharma, or chö, looked at in terms of actual experience, means to go through this kind of change, to go through this kind of growth or adjustment or modification, so that we actually become the people who can experience things as they actually are, instead of in a mistaken, ignorant, or deluded way. So to practice something called Dharma means to actually be interested in, to be willing to, and to really work steadily and consistently at changing ourselves, at improving or refining or developing ourselves to the point where we are what's called awake, that is, awake to how things actually are. So just like when a doctor gives a prescription, first we get diagnosis. Here's what's wrong with you. Here's the way you live wrong, your bad habits, your bad lifestyle, your inattention to your own health, the bad things you eat, the bad ways you have of thinking, the habits reinforce your negative behavior. So here's all the ways you're doing things wrong, and here's what you're going to have to do to change, to get healthy again. The first thing you need to do is stop doing the really bad things, and then start, that's the very first thing, stop all the things that are very harmful to you. So the Buddha's teachings start out exactly the same way. You need to stop doing things that are creating a lot of trouble for yourself and others, that are making you sick, that are making you suffer, that are happening to you because of your ignorance, because you're not really seeing things clearly. You need to stop killing, stealing, lying, being jealous, so on. So there's just very basic rules about things you have to stop doing right away. So what we can do right now is stop making things worse for ourselves. Then changing in a more positive way is more of like slow, long-term, takes determination, patience. So it's just like a doctor says, okay, first stop eating the junk food, stop smoking, stop drinking, your liver is bad or your kidneys are bad or whatever. This is what you have to stop right away. Then, here's what I want you to do. Start an exercise program that will slowly improve your health. Start sleeping regularly. Try to reduce the stress in your life, right? And especially when you see certain things happening to your body, to your mind, pay attention and don't fall into the bad habit, right? Buddha taught in the same way. First stop making more trouble, stop making things worse, and then begin to study, begin to calm your mind through the Shine Shamatha, calm abiding meditation. Start paying attention so you don't make mistakes carelessly. Change the way you live, develop a more positive outlook that will reduce the stress, so you can develop more positive qualities. So first you start with cutting the negative, and then you start working on developing the positive, the healthy outlook, the healthy way of living. So that's why in the general teachings of Dharma at the basic level, we give the analogy or image of the Buddha as like a physician or a doctor. And we're like the sick person, and the Dharma, the teachings, are like the treatment, the diagnosis, and the treatment. Just like with a doctor, we can go to the best doctor in the world, get the best diagnosis, best advice, best medicine. Just like with a doctor, it then becomes our responsibility, it becomes up to us whether we actually follow that advice, whether we take the treatment correctly, and whether we change our habits and improve our health. Same way. So this prescriptive side of Dharma, of the teaching, involves both reducing the negative and increasing the positive. So there's both an aspect of what we call purification and of development or improvement. These are two necessary components, which makes spiritual practice, let's call it that, very different from other things in life. When we say that we are trying to become better people and really be honest and look at our own faults and so on, then we can say, okay, that's something spiritual, that's a spiritual practice. In ordinary worldly way of looking at things, we just see people, take people as they are. We say he's this kind of person, he's that kind of person, she's like this, she's like that, as if it's just kind of natural or fixed or stable, like it doesn't change. And the way we try to get ahead in life is by focusing on our strengths and developing them and having other people notice them and praise them and give us, encouragement and advancement because of our strengths, and then we hide our weaknesses and deficiencies both from ourselves and from others. And then if we get close to another human being and they start to see all those negative tendencies and weaknesses and things we've been hiding, we get very upset and we don't like them anymore. Maybe if we're married, we'll just divorce rather than have to look at and deal with the negative things that have been there the whole time. So in short, the worldly way is emphasize the positive, hide the negative, but the Dharma or spiritual way is deal with the negative and in that way also improve the positive. Improve the positive, and the way to improve and develop positive qualities is to really look at and remove or purify the negative qualities. So when you stop feeling a lot of anger or jealousy or resentment towards others, then it's not like there's nothing there. Automatically that gap that you've created in your mind is filled with openness, kindness, acceptance, receptivity. So if there's no negative, the positive fills the space, like that. So in Dharma, we don't say that people are really just one way, that they're either this kind of person or that kind of person, that either they're a this lifer type of person or a next lifer kind of person, or a liberation-seeking kind of person. We see all of these as stages that even one person can pass through as they develop themselves through Dharma training. So without a path that is a starting point and then progress and then arriving at a different point where you look back and say, oh, I've changed in the following ways. Without that sense of a journey or a path of improving, refining, developing, then there's no real Dharma. So why am I saying this? Because there's often a misunderstanding that being a spiritual person means that maybe you have some kind of fantastic experiences or you have special powers. You can hypnotize people, or just being around that person makes you so happy and full of love and joy, and so that's something spiritual. But in reality, being a spiritual person practicing Dharma means going through this process of both seeing the negative for what it is and being willing, making the effort to change it and to develop the positive instead of the negative to really change. So either it was Lama Jurme, or maybe it was Palden Atisha who said, the sign of true accomplishment of Dharma is genuine reduction in our own negative mental tendencies. So now we'll give a kind Lamala a break from his translation job and see if there's any questions about what I've said as my introduction to what a Dharma is. Did everyone understand what we're talking about tonight? Yeah.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see how you have progressed in the path? How can you notice the difference?
Me personally?
No, I mean in general. How can a student, a Dharma practitioner, know where he is or she is?
Well, whatever your spiritual path is, whatever your practice is, however you describe it to yourself, if you ask yourself maybe first thing in the morning, is there some way I can be a better person today than I was yesterday? And then at the very end of the day, before you sleep, you ask yourself, did I do a better job today in maybe this difficult situation? Did I not get angry as fast as I have in the past? Or did I stop and look at my own mind, more in a more stable way and say, is it really good to get angry? Does it solve anything? Did I do a good job? And if you develop that habit of asking yourself and looking back and checking your own motivation and the result of your actions of body, speech, and mind every day, then if you just continue to do that, then you can say to yourself over time, yes, this is working. That, from yesterday to today, something may have changed, but definitely from last month to this month, something has changed. And last year, I was a very different kind of person from who I am today. So this is working and I should continue. So you give some positive reinforcement also. Mm.
Imagine everybody gets to the enlightenment state, and I don't mean now, but a few millions of years from now, everyone's got to the point where the problems don't matter anymore. Everyone accepted the impermanence.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't life get a little tedious? What's to overcome that?
What's really interesting is that we didn't even get there in this talk, because it's just, you can only do so much. But what's really interesting is that when you start to look at the world and train in the context of Vajrayana Buddhism, you can't say that the Buddhahood or enlightenment of everyone is millions of years in the future. It's already right now.
Oh no, I mean everyone.
Yes,
everyone.
Everyone.
Every single
everyone.
One. Every single one has that feeling right now.
It's not a feeling. It's about what the true nature of things actually is, and that we have that true nature. It's not something we have to get in the future. Yes, but that's the difference between how we look at things and how they actually are. So that's what we're working on. Mm-hmm. We're not changing reality. We're changing our own perception or experience. So if you want to say that being completely in harmony with all others and accepting of things as they are, and that sense of openness and peace and joyousness and loving kindness and compassion is tedious, I'm a little skeptical.
Me too.
Okay. Sometimes people have the idea of I don't want to, it's not like I'm criticizing Christianity, okay, but sometimes people say about a Christian heaven, okay, so you just sit there forever, and it's okay, it's nice, there's flowers and everyone you love is there, but then what? What do you actually do all day, It's not that kind of thing. It's not like that. Yeah, it's your way of being is changed. So from now on, when you meet somebody who doesn't know anything about Buddhism and they say, well, is it a philosophy or a religion or a science of mind? You can just say, yes. Correct. Anyway, we'll deal with your problem in millions of years when we get there, I think.
I hope I'm here then.
Other people? Mm-hmm.
In the time that Buddha teach and now, the times are completely different. Like life nowadays is stressing, rushing. How can you integrate the not just integrate if you want to practice Dharma, how can you in the middle way, how can you, I'm not explaining.
I know what you're asking.
Okay. Thank you.
You're asking how can we really integrate the deep spiritual truth or value of Dharma into our lives as we actually live them? The things that we have to deal with?
Not in the point of view of a real practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying in the point of view of someone who wants or would like to practice a little more,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to pay your bills, you have to work, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
do all the things you have to do in this society.
Actually, the main thing that I teach in all the places I go is exactly about this, because it's something we can talk about slowly over the next few days, because it's a very big topic and it's important to a lot of people. But the main thing is that, again, it's our own idea of what it means to do spiritual practice and how to do it. It's that idea that we need to change. Because we start with this idea that the spiritual life or practice is one thing, and then everything else we have to deal with, the real stuff in life, work and family and money and all these things, that somehow these are different, or they're in tension, in conflict, that we want to practice more, but we have all these other things to deal with. And the more we deal with those things, the less time or energy or whatever we have to do what we think of as spiritual practice. But that very idea that they're separate and two different things is too limited, especially in Vajrayana, where we say all experience is our own experience, and therefore all experience is material for spiritual practice. There's nothing that happens to us in life that can't be part of our spiritual practice. So it's a very big topic. We slowly can talk more about it.
I have a question. I don't know if my English is enough, but I will try.
If not, he can help.
Okay. As human beings, we give a huge credit to our faculty of reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
We use it in every aspects of our daily lives,
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes.
somehow it seems to me that concerning the three ways of learning,
Mm-hmm.
listening, reflecting, and meditating,
Mm-hmm.
it seems to me that although sometimes we can have a pretty decent understanding of concepts like emptiness or other concepts, the real juice, it's not there. It's in the end,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still, although we have sometimes the intellectual understanding, the gap, it's still huge,
Right.
and very difficult to overcome. It's
Mm-hmm.
the real difficulty. It seems sometimes it is in the distance between the understanding and the interior, the insight.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How can we work around that?
Yes. That's where we begin to become involved in what we call a training or practice. What are we practicing? We're practicing to close that gap between perception and reality more and more, to actually take the idea and have it be our experience. In Buddhism, we talk about view, meditation, and conduct. and one sense of view means philosophically what we accept as most reasonable, makes the most sense as a description of how things are. But in another sense, view means the view as we live it, how we actually see things, that kind of view. So that's the difference between the, the intellectual level and the experiential level. And so many great masters have said that the very purpose of developing the philosophical view is just to give us kind of like the orientation, the approach, and the confidence that if we engage in the training, we will get that result. Like we know what we are working on and we know how to work on it, and so gradually we make that change through our experience called meditation. Many kinds of meditation, but generally meditation. We have to do that. Meditation means changing our own experience, training our own experience. It's experiential. So Mipam, for example, said if you just meditate, but you don't have the view as the starting point, then you cannot get any result. But if you have just a view in the philosophical sense and don't have the view in the sense of to the experience.
Thank you.
But concerning about this question, we always have to keep them together. Listening, reflecting, and practicing.
Generally, yes, but not exactly, because, for example, sometimes meditation means just letting go of all of this busy thinking that we do all the time. So there's a meditation that's called analytic or active meditation, and then there's something called placement or stillness meditation, Chegom and Jokgom. And so when we train like in shamatha, calm abiding, or concentration meditation, then we're not trying to keep some idea or intellectual view in at that point. We're just, in fact, letting all the thoughts that arise in the mind be noticed by our awareness and dissolve and go back to just resting or whatever we're focusing on. So there's a time to not be thinking about anything also, but just be sharp and aware and focused. But with that exception, yes, generally the hearing and contemplating and meditating are mutually reinforcing, you can say. Yes.
Well, Buddha taught many years ago in an environment that was very different from our environment.
Yeah, according to this gentleman, he agrees.
And then people with different characteristics and mental characteristics.
Yeah.
For example, you are also a Westerner.
I'm like a boiled egg. I'm like a boiled egg. I'm white on the outside and yellow on the inside.
Well, my question would be, do you think, for example, if Buddha existed in present days and was teaching to, for example, to our Western society, people the way they are today, there would be some difference, or the way you or what I mean is, do you think there is sometimes some kind of gap that can come from that difference between cultures and between the way the people work, even internally? Because I think there's a big difference in the way people
I think that
between that time and now.
Yes, I think that because of different mentalities, like Buddha himself said, you have to have different approaches or different way of explaining or presenting the teaching. But generally we can say in terms of the wrong views or bad habits or mistakes and problems that people have to recognize, try to deal with and purify, that changes. Not fundamentally, we're still dealing with ignorance. I don't want to say too much, but we're still dealing with the basic emotionality and disturbed states of mind. But the specific forms that they take and the problems people have and what they have to deal with, that changes. But in terms of the reality of what is realized, of what the true nature of things is, the true nature of phenomena, the true nature of this mind which experiences and perceives, that doesn't change from one culture to another, from one language to another, from one time in history to another. You see what I mean?
Yes.
Mm.
Well, in that part, well, yes, but I mean it's about the first approach. I don't know, I have the idea, I don't know if it's right, that nowadays are much more complex in terms of individuals. I think are more individualistic. I think in those times there was more collective feeling, not so much individualistic, so self-centered.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense of getting to the person, I think perhaps some problems might be slightly.
Yeah, but I think even today that kind of difference exists between societies, like a Chinese or Vietnamese traditional Asian society still has, or Japanese has a much more collective focus, where the conformity is a very positive value, unlike in other societies, Western societies, where individualism is emphasized as part of the spiritual and philosophical tradition. So I don't think that's purely historical. I think even now is different. And so to say the way you teach a person in one situation or in another is also different for that reason. But finally what you're trying to point out or help them to understand is the same. And I can guarantee you that the way I'm talking about Dharma now is not exactly what the Buddha would have said. I just do my best, But it's of course from my experience being in this time, working, talking to all of you, using whatever language I know and so on. Tired? Good.
And my feet are numb.
Yeah. Should we put off the slideshow till tomorrow, maybe? Should we take a vote? How do you operate here? Is it democracy system, or you just let Lama decide? Or I don't want to break the rules. Do you want to see the slides tonight of Tibet, or wait till tomorrow? Tonight? You can sleep if you want. Okay. So, thank you for that. Let's end this part. Sonam di tamche zikpanye tomne nyepe dranam pamje shing che gana ji balon drupai sipe tsole droa droa sho jambar pao jidra jamba dan kundu zambo de an dejan de da kunji je so dalab jenge wa de da tamche rapto tu sun shaba jarwa tamche je ngo kala chok de ngapa de da shenge we tsawa de kon jan zambo je rapto ngo. Thank you for your help.